They kicked me out on my 18th birthday for a nursery, then I found out they'd been stealing from my D*at mom's millionaire family. So, things have been rough lately between me and my dad. I just turned 18 last week, and instead of a celebration, he decided it was the perfect time to kick me out. My mom passed away when I was just 3 years old in a tragic accident. Since then, it's been one girlfriend after another for my dad, relationship after relationship that never lasted. Honestly, I can't remember a single time growing up when there wasn't some woman staying at our place. I had a nanny who looked after me during the day while my dad was at work. Then, like clockwork, he'd come home with his current girlfriend in tow. After my mom died, he completely cut ties with her side of the family. He said there was no point staying in touch. I figured they didn't want the constant reminder of losing her, so no one ever fought for custody or even visited. It was just me and my dad, but he never really acted like he wanted to be a dad. Most of his time went into his job or whichever woman he was dating at the moment. As a kid, I really tried to bond with him. I wanted his attention, his affection, just something. But all I ever got was the bare minimum. Eventually, I gave up and trained myself not to expect anything. That was my childhood, quiet, lonely, and honestly kind of depressing. The only real family I had was my grandfather. He'd visit when he could, and those were the only moments that felt like home. Sadly, he couldn't take me in because my father refused to give up custody. To be fair, my dad wasn't abusive back then, just cold, distant. I guess my grandpa never had strong enough legal grounds to fight for me, even if he wanted to. Sometimes grandpa would come over, other times, I'd visit him. But no matter what, my dad always made sure I never stayed longer than a few days, 3 or 4 tops. It's like he was afraid I'd get too comfortable there. I still don't fully understand why he was so controlling about it. He didn't act like he cared about me, but at the same time, he wouldn't let me go either. It never made sense. As I got older, I started to push back more. I just wanted to spend more time at my grandfather's place, where I actually felt loved and wanted. But my dad wasn't having it. Even when I pointed out how much more kindness and attention I got from Grandpa, my dad would just shrug and say, "I'm your father. What I say goes." Grandpa tried to reason with him more than once, asking him to treat me like his own son. But nothing ever changed. He wouldn't let me move in with Grandpa, and so I was stuck living under his roof through my entire teenage years. And those teen years? Easily the worst stretch of my life. Things hit rock bottom when Veronica entered the picture. She's 28 now. Back then, she was just the niece of our neighbor, staying over while her job arranged housing. My dad started dating her, and within 8 months, they were married. Before Veronica came along, my dad never made a real effort to hide that he didn't enjoy having me around, but once she was in the picture, they both dropped any pretense. From day one, she hated me. And I honestly couldn't figure out why. I was always polite, even friendly to her. But she treated me like I was some parasite. Maybe it was because I reminded her that my dad had a life before her. I don't know. That's just my guess. Maybe she didn't need a reason. Maybe she just hated me because she could. What I do know is that everything got worse once she moved in. She acted like she was on a mission to make me miserable. She bossed me around constantly, treated me like a live-in servant even though we had a maid. And my dad? He just let it happen. Didn't say a word. I felt like I was living in some twisted version of Cinderella. She even talked my dad into cutting off my spending money. Before her, I could go out with friends or buy small things without issue. But now? Nope. She convinced him I was old enough to get a job and start earning my own money. Said there was no reason to spoil me anymore. So I got a part-time job just so I could have a social life and not feel like a prisoner. It was better than having to beg for kindness. Veronica made it her goal to turn my life into a nightmare. I started counting the days until I could finally leave for college and never look back. I told my grandfather what was going on. He said he'd talk to my dad, try to fix things. But nothing changed. Eventually, I stopped hoping. If Grandpa hadn't been able to help by now, it probably wasn't going to happen. He still listened when I needed to vent, and I appreciated that. But that was about it, nothing ever improved. So I accepted that I just have to hold out until I could afford to move out on my own. Then came my 18th birthday. I had a small plan to go out, buy a couple beers, and celebrate with friends. I'd been saving up for a while so I could treat myself. But of course, my dad and Veronica had other plans. And they made sure to ruin my birthday. That morning, they said they needed to talk to me. I actually got my hopes up, thinking maybe they remembered my birthday, maybe they even wanted to help with college or something. Instead, they told me I had to leave. They were kicking me out. Veronica had just found out she was pregnant, and they decided my room would make a great nursery. My dad said they thought long and hard about this and didn't want me to beg or act desperate, because that would only kill the mood. Veronica, fake sweet as ever, said this could be a great opportunity for me now that I was an adult. She tried to sound like she cared, but all I could hear was someone who'd been waiting for the chance to push me out. I was panicking inside, but I did my best to stay calm and try to reason with them. I knew that throwing a fit, crying, yelling, whatever, wasn't going to get me anywhere with these two. They didn't have an ounce of sympathy in them. So instead, I tried to reason with them. I told them they couldn't just kick me out without notice, that there had to be some legal process. I honestly wasn't sure if that was even true, but it felt like it had to be. Of course, my dad wasn't fooled. He said his lawyer had already sorted everything, and unless I had money for a lawsuit, which I didn't, there was no way I could stop them. And he was right. I didn't have the funds or the power to fight back. So I made another attempt. I said I'd pay rent if that was the issue. But Veronica shut that down fast. She told me the rent wasn't the problem. The issue was that she didn't want extra people around stressing her out while she was pregnant. She made it sound like my very existence in that house was bad for her health. Desperate, I asked if I could at least move into the basement, just somewhere out of the way, but my dad shot that down too. And I knew money wasn't the issue. He worked at a bank and made a solid income. Veronica didn't even work anymore, she quit to be a full-time housewife. So clearly, this was about something else. After going back and forth with them for a bit, it finally hit me, they were dead set on kicking me out. Now that I was legally an adult, they didn't have to face any consequences, and they knew I couldn't do much about it. So I gave up. I went to my room and started packing. I had no clue if my grandfather would even be able to take me in. One of the biggest reasons I never tried moving in with him earlier, even though I wanted to, was because he wasn't exactly in the best financial shape. He used to be a high school science teacher but had retired years ago. Back when my dad was in his 20s, Grandpa struggled with a gambling problem that really messed up his savings. Ever since, he'd been relying on my dad for financial help. He wasn't living in poverty or anything, but he didn't have much extra either. That's why I'd always hesitated to put more pressure on him. Still, I didn't have any other option left. So without overthinking it, I grabbed my stuff and went to his place. When I got there, I told him everything, what my dad had said, how they kicked me out. I'd been trying not to let this worry eat away at me for over a year, but deep down, I think I always knew this day was coming. And on top of everything else, I had college to worry about. I was supposed to start in the fall, just a few months away, and now I didn't even know how I was going to afford it. All of it, everything, just hit me at once. I broke down crying right there in front of my grandpa. That's when he said he'd had enough, that he'd seen enough. He told me it was time for him to finally do something he should have done a long time ago. I had no clue what he meant by that. He didn't explain, just walked into another room and made a phone call. I tried to listen in, but I couldn't hear much, so I gave up. After about an hour and a half, he came back and told me not to worry anymore. He said I could stay with him now, permanently, and that I didn't have to worry about college either. I asked what he meant, but he told me not to worry about the details and that it wasn't my concern right now. He was clearly upset, so I didn't push it. Instead, he told me to go spend my birthday the way I'd planned, with my friends. He said 18 was too important a milestone to spend moping around the house, especially now that things were finally looking up. So that's what I did. I went out with my friends and tried to enjoy myself for the first time all day. I put my phone on silent just in case my dad tried to call. I wasn't about to let him ruin the night the same way he ruined the morning. I didn't see any of his texts or missed calls until I got back to my grandpa's place around 10 p.m. And to my surprise, he was blowing up my phone. Somehow, he'd developed a conscience and was now begging me to come home. I didn't reply right away. I waited until the next morning, and then I finally messaged him back. I told him I wasn't coming back, not after everything he'd put me through. I didn't hold back either. I said he never treated me like a son, and now that I finally had a chance at a better life, I wasn't going to give that up. I told him straight up Veronica was even worse than he was, and the idea of going back to live with him made me sick. He'd controlled my life for so long, but I was an adult now. I got to decide where I lived, and he had no right to ask me to return, especially after he and his wife literally threw me out the day before. The only reason I'd ever hesitated was because I didn't want to be a burden on my grandfather. But now that Grandpa was okay with me staying, there was no reason for me to ever go back. After I sent that message, my dad replied with a long text. And honestly, it sounded like something out of a movie. He told me he'd been thinking a lot since I left. Said he found an old photo album of me in his office, and it brought back memories of all the promises he made to my mom before she died. He said he realized he was breaking those promises by putting Veronica and the new baby ahead of me. He admitted he panicked when he heard about the pregnancy and let Veronica take control, but that he regretted everything and wanted one last shot at being a decent father. He begged me to give him a second chance. But I didn't reply. Not because I didn't feel anything, I just didn't know what to think. At first, I was sure it was all manipulation. Now, I'm not so sure. I talked to Grandpa about it, hoping for some clarity, but he shut it down immediately. He warned me not to fall for my dad's act and looked genuinely disgusted by his son's behavior. Still, a part of me feels bad. My dad is finally trying to be kind to me, really trying. And he's even said he's willing to deal with Veronica's temper if that's what it takes to get me back. He's been texting every day since, bringing up random good memories from my childhood, saying how sorry he is, how much he misses me. Yesterday, he even said he'd get down on his knees and beg if that's what it took for me to come back. And I'll be honest, it tugged at me. But I still haven't replied. I don't feel ready, and part of me feels awful for that. I don't know if I'm wrong for not wanting to go back even when he's begging me to. But after everything? I just don't think I can. Update 1. So, I've officially decided I'm not going back to my dad's house. And honestly, I don't think he ever meant anything he said in those texts. I recently found out the real reason he was so desperate to get me back. It had nothing to do with love or guilt. It was all about keeping up his lifestyle, if you know what I mean. I sat down with my grandfather and opened up about everything, how Dad had been begging me to return, how guilty it was making me feel, and how I couldn't shake the thought that I was being a bad son. I tried to bring this up with Grandpa before, but he always brushed it off with, "Don't fall for it." This time, though, I needed to get it off my chest, even if he didn't have a solution. But after he listened, something changed. He got real serious and told me there was something he wasn't supposed to talk about, but that it was time I knew the truth. He told me that ever since I was little, my dad never actually paid for anything related to raising me. All the money came from my mom's side of the family. Every bit of it, my schooling, clothes, medical stuff, was funded by them. And after I got kicked out, Grandpa had finally told my mom's family how I'd been treated all these years. They were furious, not just at my dad, but also at him for staying silent for so long. But after hearing what happened, they insisted I live with Grandpa from now on. The crazy part? My dad had no idea any of this was going on. He found out only a couple of days ago, after he kicked me out and Grandpa told him everything. See, my grandfather had been the middleman the whole time. My mom's family sent him the money, and he passed it along to my dad. Dad always assumed Grandpa was funding everything himself, and Grandpa never corrected him. He knew my dad hated Mom's family and wouldn't take their money if he knew the truth. And if that happened, I'd be the one to suffer. So, to make sure I was taken care of, Grandpa played along. And the money my mom's family sent? It was a lot, probably the reason I was able to attend private school for so long. Because let's be real, my dad wouldn't have spent a cent like that on me. But once he married Veronica, things shifted. He started keeping the money for himself and stopped using it for me. That's when he began pushing me to get a job, just so I could afford things like new clothes or going out with friends. It wasn't like I was starving, but it still felt awful. The basic things I used to have were suddenly off limits unless I paid for them myself. Even then, Grandpa didn't say anything to my mom's family. He was afraid of what might happen if they found out. But after I got kicked out, he couldn't stay silent anymore. He finally told them everything. I'll admit, I was mad at Grandpa for not telling me sooner. But he explained that my mom's family had made him promise to keep it secret. They didn't want me to know they were the ones supporting me, because they were afraid I'd want to meet them. And they couldn't bring themselves to face me, not because they didn't care, but because I looked too much like my mother. It was just too painful for them. I was still frustrated that Grandpa hadn't spoken up earlier, especially with how my dad and Veronica were treating me, but he admitted he'd been scared. He worried that if Mom's family got involved, they'd take custody and cut off his contact with me entirely. It was irrational, but the fear was real for him. We talked everything through. And even though I'm still trying to fully wrap my head around it all, I'm glad I finally know the truth. Now I know my dad wasn't trying to be a better person, he just didn't want to lose the money. That's the only reason he was so desperate to get me back. I always knew that new, sweet version of him was too good to be true. Update 2. After learning the truth, I blocked my dad. A few days went by without hearing from him until he started using Veronica's phone to get through to me. She even called me herself. I didn't have her number saved, so I answered without realizing who it was. The moment I heard her voice, I wanted to hang up. But my curiosity got the better of me, so I stayed on the line. She was fake crying, sobbing like she was some tragic victim. Said my dad was heartbroken, and she couldn't stand to see him so upset, especially in her condition, like she had some terminal illness or something. I told her straight up I didn't want to talk to her, and she handed the phone to my dad. He barely got a word out before I cut him off. I told him to save the act, I knew everything. I said if he didn't understand what I meant, Maybe Mom's family could explain it better. Then I hung up and blocked her number too. That moment felt incredibly satisfying. And Grandpa told me I handled it well. In other news, I talked to Grandpa about meeting my mother's family. Even though I knew they'd been avoiding it because seeing me would be too painful, I told him I still wanted to meet them. I needed to thank them for everything. It took some convincing, but Grandpa finally got them to agree. They're flying down to visit in a few days. I've seen photos of them, my grandparents and my uncle, but I know meeting them in person is going to be something else entirely. I'm nervous, but I'm also excited. I have a feeling they're going to love me, and I already know I'll love them too. Update 3. I just got back from meeting my mother's family for the first time and it was amazing. Grandpa was with me the whole time, which helped, because I was shaking like a leaf. My maternal grandparents were incredibly warm, and my uncle? He's basically just an older version of me. We all teared up the moment we saw each other. We must have looked ridiculous to the other people at the restaurant, but none of us cared. Once we got past the initial wave of emotions, we sat down and talked. They asked all about my life, my interests, and my plans. And for the first time in a long while, it felt like someone genuinely cared. They also told me not to stress about college, they'd already planned to cover all of it. I guess they assumed Grandpa told me, but he hadn't, so it was a huge surprise and a massive weight off my shoulders. We had a great time together, and before they leave next week, we're planning to meet up a few more times. They've promised that from now on, we'll see each other at least once a month. Either I'll fly out to them, or they'll come to me. And honestly, that promise means the world to me.